if you're not muted, please mute yourself for now. And my name is Megan Wilden, and it is my honor and delight to be the Executive Director of OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Berkshire Community College. For many years, we've had extraordinary lectures by... We need to do some muting. Ray, can you keep an eye on that? Thank you. We're doing this in meeting format, which is always exciting today. And so for those of you who may be new to OLLI, we are a membership program in the Berkshires that offers educational, social, cultural, and volunteer opportunities designed especially by and for people 50 years and better. We offer 5 semesters of non-credit classes each year. And in fact, our second summer semester begins on the week of July 19th, in just over a week. And we have the most amazing array of classes, which is true every semester, ranging from the film Bill Murray, quantum theory, and so much more. And we encourage you to go to our website and check those out. And we also offer a wonderful with special events and also a distinguished speaker series. And Jeremy Yudkin has been one of our most distinguished speakers over the years, joining us each year to talk about share his vast knowledge in classical music. He's also doing a weekly column this summer in the Berkshire Eagle on Thursdays. That is a preview of each week's performances in Tanglewood, and he'll be doing free lectures on Saturday afternoons at 2:30 starting tomorrow at the Lenox Library outdoors under a tent. So it's a wonderful way to dive even deeper into everything that Tanglewood has to offer. But now it is my great pleasure to introduce one of the co-chairs of our wonderful Distinguished Speaker Series committee, Lance Sturman. Lance leads a shared interest group on the absolute sound, on high-end sound systems and music, and as well as being the source of so many of our wonderful speakers. Lance?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Lance Sturman. It's my honor to introduce Jeremy Yudkin. Jeremy got his PhD in historical musicology from Stanford. He is the director of the Center for Beethoven Studies and professor and former chair of the Department of Musicology at Boston University, where he received the highest teaching award. Jeremy is the author of 10 books that cover a range of musical topics. His principal fields of research, in addition to Beethoven, include medieval music, Miles Davis, and the Beatles. I am pleased and proud to present, I am pleased and proud to present, to introduce my friend, Jeremy Yudkin.
Thank you so much, Lance. That's a lovely introduction, and it's always a pleasure to hear you. Thank you. And thank you, Megan and OLLI, for inviting me again. I think this marks my 20th year or so of giving lectures for OLLI. Maybe a little more than that, but I haven't really kept close track. But I always enjoy it, and I enjoy the audience. My plan is to speak a bit about this season and some of the interesting things that are going to be happening, and to speak about this Tanglewood season coming up, starting tonight and then starting with full orchestra, and therefore official opening night tomorrow, June 10th. The plan today is for me to talk for 3/4 of an hour or so, and then to open it up for questions. You can put questions into the chat room at any time during my talk. and we'll gather them all up. And at the end, Megan has kindly agreed to read them all, and I shall try my best to answer them. So we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. I would like to say just a few words about the fact that Tanglewood is open again. Last year, of course, as you know, was cancelled because of the global tragedy, and Tanglewood had not been closed for a season since 1943 as a result of the Second World War. So that's a very long time and very unusual circumstances that caused Tanglewood to close. So here we are back again, and there are some accommodations to public health, of course, that are necessitated as things are changing so rapidly. Firstly, the season, the BSO season at any rate, is only 6 weeks instead of 8. So there will be 12 orchestral concerts, because whereas the concerts always used to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon, they're now only on Saturday evenings and Sunday afternoon. So that brings us down to 12 orchestral concerts. There are Friday night smaller ensembles, which involve what we used to call chamber music, which used to be in Ozawa Hall, but everything will now be in the shed. And small groups will be playing on Friday nights in the shed. The Tanglewood Music Center Orchestra will also be in the shed instead of Ozawa Hall. And other accommodations are the length of the programs. The programs were usually pretty much exactly 2 hours with a 20-minute intermission. But now the concerts will have no intermission and last just 80 minutes, which sounds ideal to me. I've always wanted concerts that lasted around an hour and a half and didn't have intermissions. I'm not a great fan of intermissions. It seems to me to spoil one's concentration. Anyway, that's the accommodation that they're making this year. And of course, the seating will be somewhat separated. The shed will only have half the number of normal people. It usually seats 5,000 or so. This will be about 2,500 people, not counting the lawn. So it's a modified season, but a real season nonetheless. And I am very excited, as I'm sure many people are, to be able to go back to Tanglewood properly. I would like also, if I may, to say just a word about our orchestra and its by now not so terribly new conductor, Andres Nelsons. Nelsons made a name for himself in England at the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, which is a remarkable regional orchestra, not in London. The great famous old orchestras are all in London, of course, but this is in Birmingham in the Central Midlands. And that orchestra made a name for itself many, many years ago under the directorship of Simon Rattle, and produced Rattle, one of the great conductors of his time. And when we were searching for a new music director, Nelsons was conducting the Birmingham Orchestra, and some of you may remember we auditioned several conductors, and he was selected. Now, in my 40 years or so of attending Tanglewood concerts and watching and listening to the BSO in Symphony Hall in Boston, I have to say that I have never seen a relationship between a conductor and an orchestra that is this creative and productive and well-meaning. I've seen many guest conductors come and go. We've had many music directors, and some of them have been great and some of them not so good. Some of them started off exciting and then stayed too long. No names here. But this relationship between the conductor and the orchestra is exceedingly rare. And I just want to point out to people, it's the kind of thing that we shouldn't take for granted. It's a very special relationship. It's a very difficult relationship. Of course, there are 100 people, all of whom have to do what they're told by one person. So it's kind of like an army. But if you have a great leader of a group and everyone is made to feel that they matter, that they have a relationship with their leader, that they trust him, they believe he makes intelligent choices, and they trust his musical instincts, then there is this magic that is created, which, as I say, is exceedingly rare around the world and is something we should relish every time we watch them. In fact, you can see it almost by seeing the faces of the players who are so engaged in connecting with Andres. And if you ever are able, perhaps sometimes on TV, to see Andres's face on some of the broadcasts, you can see that he is connecting with every single player. He looks directly at the horn player or the second violist, and they feel included, they feel that they have agency. And that, of course, is the great difficulty of playing in a symphony orchestra. These are all superb musicians, all of whom grew up thinking that they would be a great soloist, and ended up sitting in a group of 100 people playing music. It's extremely important for each one of them to feel that they are having some control over the music, and that they're contributing to something meaningful. And Nelson somehow manages to make every single one of the players on stage feel that way. So now let me come to the repertoire for this summer. We start with an all Beethoven program, and this is only proper because the last year, 2020, in which the season was cancelled, was an extremely important musical year around the world because it was the 250th anniversary, we don't get those very often, of the birth of Ludwig van Beethoven. And the world was set upon celebrating Beethoven's anniversary birthday, including, of course, the BSO and many other orchestras around the world. Only a very small handful of these concerts took place in January, February, and March, and then, of course, everything disappeared. So this season, we're paying tribute to Beethoven by an all Beethoven concert starting tomorrow night with the Prometheus Overture, an overture based on the Prometheus myth. As you all know, the myth that Prometheus went up to heaven and stole the gift of fire for human beings. But the myth is a bit more complicated than that. Prometheus stole fire from the gods in order to create human beings and used fire to fire clay, and then turned these clay figures into humans by teaching them all the sciences and all the arts. And so Beethoven wrote a ballet for this story, the only ballet he ever wrote, actually, the only full-length ballet, with scenes depicting this story. And the ballet is almost never performed nowadays. What is performed frequently is the opening overture to this ballet. And I'll play you a little bit of this music now. It starts out with a grandiose gesture, then has a lovely quiet passage, and then just bursts into life with immense energy. So let me play this for you, a little bit of this for you now. And I hope somebody will tell me if you cannot hear the music. How's the sound for everybody? Megan, can you tell me if that sounds all right?
It's
I thought
good.
it sounded wonderful.
Oh, good. Okay, excellent. Thank you. And of course, you know, all of you audience members, you can adjust the volume on your own computer as well, if you need to. So we start with this relatively early work of Beethoven's from 1801. Beethoven was born in 1770, hence the 250th anniversary in 2020. So if you bear that in mind, you can tell how old he was at each stage of his career. In 1801, he was 31, and just really starting out making a successful career for himself in Vienna. And over the next 10 years, became one of the greatest composers in Vienna, and of course, as his fame spread around the world. After the overture, there's a piano concerto, Beethoven's last piano concerto, written in 1809, towards the end of this first decade, an extraordinarily prolific decade in Beethoven's life, in which he wrote his first 8 symphonies, all 5 piano concertos, the violin concerto, a couple of dozen piano sonatas, 9 string quartets, not to mention the little nugget that we call the Fidelio opera. So he was extremely busy and in a greatest creative phase of his life. The 5th piano concerto is one of his most remarkable works. It starts out with lots of flourishes on the keyboard, unusual to start a piano concerto with the solo instrument. Normally the orchestra lays out all the themes, and then the piano comes in and plays the piano's version of those themes. But here, the orchestra just gives us a few punctuating chords, and then the pianist shows off not just his technique, but actually the range of the instrument, because this concerto was written for a new piano, a piano that ranged over the small 5 octaves that most pianos had been limited to in Mozart and Haydn's time. Now Beethoven has a much larger range, and he writes music deliberately to show this off. Let me just play you the very opening minute of the Fifth Piano Concerto, and imagine visually the pianist stretching out across this new and expanded keyboard. And then the orchestra comes in with the main theme of the first movement. This first movement is in E flat and has this somewhat regal and triumphant air to it. One later publisher called this concerto as a result the Emperor Concerto, not a name given to it by Beethoven. The second movement is in an extremely remote key from this one, and so it gives it a sound of otherworldliness, a kind of ethereal quality that sets it completely apart. What I'm going to do is play you just that last little bit there. No, why don't I just play the first theme of the first movement, which is in E flat, so you have that in your ears. You know, you don't need to know the names of keys. I always tell my audiences that the name of the key doesn't matter. You could call it grass or orange or whatever you want to call it, just so long as you have something in your ear. You know it's that key, even if you don't know that it's E flat or what E flat means, because you just have that sound in your ear. So here's a tune from the first movement, which is, it lays out the E flat, starts in E flat, ends in E flat, is always in E flat. Keep that in your ears. And here's the second movement. Isn't that gorgeous? Absolutely lovely. And then there's the last movement, which has a much more catchy tune and leaves you with something to whistle. On the second half of the program is the Fifth Symphony. Now, there's a problem with the Fifth Symphony, which is that we all know it, but I would encourage you to pretend that you don't, and to try to listen to it as though it were an unfamiliar and exciting piece, because it is an extraordinarily exciting piece. You all know how it begins. Actually, the way that was played is not quite right, and we may remember this opening incorrectly, because Beethoven actually wrote a much longer held note. Ya-da-da-dum, ta-ta-ta-ta. Much longer held note there the second time, which makes it much more compelling, I think. So here is a recording that does that. That's how Beethoven wrote it, and one can see why he changed his mind and lengthened that second long note after much thought. But just for fun, I thought I'd play you a version of that that really takes the idea of lengthening that second long note to a certain extreme. Now, if anybody recognizes that music, why don't they put in the chat where that piece comes from? It was actually written before it appeared in a famous place, but perhaps some of you will recognize that famous place and tell us in the chat. The remarkable thing about the Beethoven Fifth Symphony is the way that it is tied together by that simple motive. And there are some places where we can recognize the use of that rhythmic motive, and some places where that rhythmic motive is a bit more hidden. So obviously the first movement has a great deal of it, but let's play a little bit more of the normal orchestral one and see if you can count the number of times you hear that rhythmic motive. Just any pitch, anywhere, any instrument in the first couple of minutes. Well, I don't know about you, but I lost count. All I can say is that it appears in almost every single measure of the beginning of the first movement. Let's listen now to the third movement and see if we can catch that rhythmic motive. Again, we're listening just for the rhythm, not for the particular melody, but any usage of this short, 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 long pattern. Here's the third movement. Again, the music is completely different from the first movement, and yet it's obviously based on exactly that same motive. Now, the end of this third movement, something happens that's rather strange, and the music seems to kind of dissipate into a ghostly repetition of that returning motive yet again. It's almost as though the composer is completely obsessed with it to such an extent that neither he nor we can get away from it. Let me just take a second to find that spot. Well, it's hard to see on this and at the same time see you. At any rate, what we get is a kind of a whisper of this, ba, 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 ba. And then it very quickly transitions into the last movement, the fourth movement, which seems to wipe out this obsession to bring in trombones and trumpets in a blaze of glory, as though at least we can get rid of that obsession for a while. It also switches from C minor to C major in an exciting opening blast coming out of this little ghostly. It goes like this. Now, this last movement is overflowing with themes. Normally we get one or two themes per movement. This one immediately goes into 4 before moving anywhere else. So 4 themes introduced right at the beginning. Again, we have completely forgotten about that short, 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 long motive. Here's theme number 2 with the horns. Well, do you notice how this next theme is built up? That sounds perfectly innocuous. But of course, under the skin, we hear short, 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 long. Now here's the 4th theme. Again, at first glance, it seems to have nothing to do with our rhythmic motive. But if you listen carefully, short, 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 long, da dee da 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 dee, da da ba 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 bee. So this work is remarkably unified, and it's unified throughout by this rhythmic motive, both when we notice it, when it's overt, and also when it's covert, which is why it adds to this sense of both excitement and tremendous integrity. So I urge you, when you listen to the Fifth Symphony, to pay it your full attention instead of what is extremely tempting for everybody to do, to sit back and hum along and say, oh yes, I know this piece. One more thing about this current season that's coming up is the featuring of a number of works by new youngish composers. And in so doing, the BSO is recognizing what we in the United States have come to recognize in almost every single aspect of our lives, which is that people of color and people of different ethnic backgrounds have on the whole tended to be left out both of our society and of our cultural institutions. So there are 5 composers who are scattered throughout the program this summer. And the first one comes from Atlanta, Georgia. He's black. The second is a female composer, also part of a group rather slighted in the past history of this organization, Hannah Kendall, who is English but was born to parents from Guyana. Thirdly, Iman Habibi, who is from Canada but of Iranian extraction. He's a pianist and a composer. Fourth, Jessie Montgomery, who's from New York, but she is lauded by the African American community. And finally, Missy Mazzoli, who is perhaps the most established of these young composers. She's on the faculty of the Mannes College of Music in New York. And in 2018, she became one of only 2 women who have ever been commissioned to write an opera for the Metropolitan Opera Company. She has also been named as composer in residence with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Now, I don't want you to be frightened by the idea of new young composers. None of these pieces is particularly difficult, and none of them is strongly atonal or aggressive. All of them have one thing in common, however, and that is that somehow or other they give a nod or a tip of the hat to Beethoven, the birthday boy of 2020. So let me just play you a little bit of one of these pieces, just so you get an idea. As I say, these 5 composers will have pieces scattered throughout the season, among some of the great works of the repertory: Brahms, Sibelius, Tchaikovsky. As though the BSO decided for this season, imagine putting yourself into the place of the artistic administrator of the orchestra who has to decide what to do this year: a shorter season, but a renaissance of the orchestra and a renaissance of Tanglewood. And the result is to put well-known works, well-known performers mostly, popular works, but still with a sprinkling of new and completely unfamiliar pieces. So let me start talking about the piece that we're going to hear this weekend, which is by Carlos Simon. And let me say another word about him. He is a native of Atlanta, Georgia, as I mentioned, and he writes concert music, film scores, and often with the influence of jazz or gospel. He is very successful, has won many prizes and awards, and has been on the faculty of 2 historically Black colleges, and now teaches at Georgetown University. The piece that we're going to hear this weekend, and I'll play you a minute or 2 of it now, is called Fate Now Conquers, which is a piece that nods twice to Beethoven. Firstly, it's based on the harmonic progression of the second movement of Beethoven's 7th Symphony. And secondly, the title is a quotation from Beethoven's diary. And Beethoven's diary often had little maxims or quotations from classical authors or from Goethe or from Eastern philosophy that seemed to act as a way of encouraging Beethoven to go on with what was, after all, a very difficult life, and continue to dedicate his whole life to writing new music, which he knew was in him and that he regarded as a gift to humanity, as indeed it has proven to be. The quotation that Beethoven wrote in his diary is from Homer's Iliad, which is a complicated quote and basically means, even though fate overcomes us all, we should still make sure to produce that which is in us, the best of us. So let me play you a little bit of Carlos Simon's Fate Now Conquers. That's not so frightening, is it? And I hope you'll enjoy that piece. Occasionally you might hear, which is of course, the second movement of Beethoven's Seventh. Yum bum 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 da 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 dum da da dum. You know that tune and that theme, so that you can recognize little bits of it throughout. Let me get back so that I can see you all. Once again, thank you for inviting me. Just as a summary, what we have in the next 6 weeks is a series of concerts, 2 orchestral concerts every weekend for 6 weeks, and a mixture of very well-known pieces, very popular pieces, Sibelius, Tchaikovsky, Brahms, and so on, played excitingly by Andris Nelsons and the BSO, and then occasional new pieces scattered in as a kind of seasoning. So those are a few comments about the new Tanglewood season, which is extremely exciting for me to be able to talk about. Of course, exciting for all of us who are here in the Berkshires in the summer. And just a quick reminder, as Megan mentioned at the beginning, I will have a column in the newspaper yesterday. It was online in the Eagle, but in future it should be in the printed version every Thursday about the Tanglewood season. And on Saturday afternoons throughout the season at 2:30 in the Lenox Library, I'll be talking about the music for that particular weekend. So Saturday afternoon is designed so that I can talk about Saturday night's concert and Sunday afternoon's concert. It'll be, as I say, in an open-sided tent next to the Lenox Library. Thank you all for listening, and do ask any questions you like.
You can put the questions in chat, or you can try raising your hand, and I will try to find you and unmute you. But questions and comments are welcomed and encouraged.
Did anyone give a guess about that electronic piece that I... Oh, yes, I see. Saturday Night Fever. Yes, well done. It's Walter Murphy. The piece is actually called A Fifth of Beethoven, and it's used in Saturday Night Fever as Travolta swaggers into the bar, nodding to his friends. It's a great way to accompany that scene.
Well, I've never seen such a quiet OLLI audience before. Usually a discussion is a high point of our programs. You are muted, but we welcome your thoughts or comments if you want to unmute yourself or raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from you, hear from what you've missed about Tanglewood and what you're looking forward to.
Everyone is bludgeoned into silence.
I think everyone's in bliss. Oh, here's a funny question.
Right. Have all the musicians in the orchestra returned after this year of the pandemic? Are there any new members of the orchestra?
I'm afraid I don't know about who's been hired and who has not stayed. They're going to be using a smaller than usual orchestra. If you're careful, you notice that the pieces chosen are, not huge pieces, not, for example, Mahler, which needs between 100 and 130 people on stage, not Stravinsky, which needs a similar number, partly because of the spacing. they have to have an orchestra that's perhaps 60 people.
And Ben Lipson has a question.
Well, two
or
questions.
comment.
I thought I noticed they are doing Stravinsky's Firebird.
Are they doing the Firebird? Well, there are several different arrangements of Firebird, and you may well be right.
And well, the TMC Fellows are doing Pulcinella Suite by
Yes,
Stravinsky also. But the Firebird is the BSO Saturday, July 24th.
great. Okay. As I said, there are different arrangements orchestrations, I should say, that Stravinsky wrote himself for that, and I presume they're choosing the not very large one.
Yeah. And then the other question I have about size is, how do you think the chamber concerts will sound in the shed? I know, I remember hearing Alicia de la Rocha playing Mozart sonatas in the shed, and it was still quite good, but the acoustics in Ozawa are so much better.
I can only agree with you.
And Mal Wasserman has a question not quite related to music, but she says, is it going to rain at Tanglewood tonight? That is the million-dollar question every night.
Let me just call up the authorities up there. Hello, is it going to rain tonight? Can't tell you, they said.
Do you have any thoughts about tonight's program with the Knights?
Oh, the Knights are great. They're so much fun, small, very intense ensemble, and they play both Baroque and modern music. They're a great group.
Well, I'm so glad to see the sun.
Yeah, I see it out my window now. I hardly recognized it.
Other questions or comments? You can raise your physical hand or your Zoom hand. Pat?
Yeah, this is just going back to your comment about Nelson's rapport with the orchestra. I listened to the rehearsal this morning, and that was one thing that really struck me. That, you know, he would chat with them, he would smile with them, he'd bend down and talk to somebody. It just seemed very collegial.
Extraordinarily collegial. It's, as I said, very rare to see something like that. And, you know, you can hear the difference. You can hear the result in their music making. You see that everyone is on the edge of their seat when they're playing. And in the old days, you know, you'd see violinists kind of playing like that.
Other comments, questions? Predictions? Wishes? Fears?
I can't seem to get on things, but I just wanted to ask if Jeremy could comment on Apollo's Fire.
Yeah, they're another one of those small ensembles that are also very exciting. You know, there's been an interesting fashion recently to have small conductorless ensembles. There used to be one, the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, that did that. But Apollo's Fire and the Knights are the ones that are small, intense, no conductor, or usually no conductor. And the result is that people really listen to each other. It makes a big difference when they listen to each other.
Apparently I have tickets, but I don't know them.
Yeah, oh yes, they're terrific also.
Good.
Ben?
Yeah, Jeanette Sorrell did one of the walks and talks at Tanglewood a few years ago. And what I remember were two things. One was that George Szell interviewed her to be assistant conductor of the Cleveland Symphony at his home. And after a nice lunch or interview, whatever it was, he said, "Of course you realize I would never hire a woman for this position." Something he couldn't get away with today. Couldn't get away with saying, he could obviously select whoever he wanted. But she also said that her mentors told her she was crazy to try to start her own ensemble. It couldn't happen. And here she is years later.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say one of the two things you remember about her is her red hair.
Yes, that too.
Yeah, she's a remarkable musician. And actually, you know, these are all small groups, all of whom are remarkable musicians.
Wonderful. And Elaine writes, looking forward to this season of live music once again, and so grateful for it. I think that we can all agree that not being able to enjoy Tanglewood last year and so many other things makes us that much more appreciative of it this year.
Indeed.
Hello, Megan.
Yep.
It's Ray. I have a question for Jeremy.
Great.
Hello, Ray.
The week that they normally had Contemporary Music Week at Azawa Hall, and I understand that they're going to have some of that this year, but is it going to be just the newer composers intertwined with the regular regular offering, or will it be a special area for new music, contemporary music?
I believe there's going to be a shorter version of the normal festival of contemporary music, with which the works are all devoted to, using the word loosely, contemporary music.
Oh, what does that mean, loosely?
Well, contemporary, you know, supposed to mean contemporary with us, means now, but it's often been used to describe music from the beginning of the 20th century on. I mean, people call Schoenberg contemporary. So that's what I mean by used loosely.
We always like that week of contemporary music, so I hope that we will be able to enjoy some of that again. Introducing electronic music and very unusual choral pieces have always been of interest to us.
Yes, there's always something very exciting going on in those concerts.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed your talk tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Jan writes in the chat, how did the BSO players fare financially over the past years? Did they lose salary? If so, were they able to have it restored? What about benefits like health insurance? Do you have any insight on that?
I'm afraid I'm not completely au courant with the arrangements with the BSO players. I do know that they took that they agreed to take a significant cut in salary. I think it was 50% while nobody was playing. But I'm not up to date with those details.
Yeah, it seems like there was some reporting early on about that. And Ben writes in the chat, I think for Ray, that the TMC fellows are playing contemporary music on July 25th and 26th. And a number of people are saying how much they've enjoyed this talk today.
Oh,
in the chat as well.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that many of them will come to your Saturday afternoon talks as well for an in-depth introduction each week to the delights in store for us all.
Well, again, this was a strange year for me too last summer, but I did manage to keep my talks going by doing them over Zoom, and had a very, very large attendance from actually all over the country, and actually other countries as well. So I'm able to say that this is my 39th straight year of doing pre-Tanglewood talks.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your insight and your palpable love of music with all of us. It's a delight to see. I don't often get to attend these things, but I was very happy to today. So if there's no other questions, last call for questions or comments, then we will wrap up, and some of us will be heading off to Tanglewood tonight, not for the BSO, but for the Knights.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank
Hope
you
to
so
see
much.
hope to see you Saturday afternoon.
Thank you, Professor Yudkin. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.